Chapter 9. A little more than 24 hours later, we were in the desert, in a rented van full of camping equipment, ready to break into one of the most secure and secretive military bases in the history of human civilization. To call it a break-in, though, would make it seem much more exciting than what we had in mind. Gicanto's scheme was for us to get taken into custody. "If you guys were older," Gicanto explained as we made the long drive from South Texas to the Nevada desert, "we could have done this the easy way. I've got a friend who works with the security subcontractor who handles civilian employees. He could have gotten us on a daily bus out of Las Vegas, but there's no way they're not going to notice a couple of 13-year-old kids." A bus that took us through the front gates would have been a convenient solution. Instead, we had to take the more challenging approach. Area 51 was famous throughout the world as the alleged site of the alleged research on the alleged UFO that had allegedly crashed outside of Roswell, New Mexico in the 1940s. We were going disguised as UFO fanatics. Gicanto was acting like a man who had no plans to return to his old life, which worried me. It wasn't that I didn't trust him, even without Smelly monitoring his vital signs for indications of deception or insanity. I could tell he genuinely wanted to help Alice, but also that he would do anything, even risk spending years in jail, if it meant getting a decent shot at going on an interstellar joyride in the Area 51 UFO. I trusted that he was on level, but I also knew I was going to have to disappoint him. Smelly didn't want Gicanto and Alice coming along because he thought they might slow us down, and I had my own reasons. I didn't want them to get killed. I was heading into a big, dangerous mess, and I didn't want to drag them along any further than I had to. Getting out of San Antonio had proved surprisingly easy. Once we were certain we'd lost our pursuers, Gicanto found an empty lot where he ditched his rusted, useless landscaping equipment. He almost looked on the verge of tears as he unhitched the trailer and abandoned the prop. The stuff was junk, but I understood how he felt. He had been holding onto that equipment for years, waiting for the moment when he would need it. And now that moment was here. There was a kind of sadness in letting something like that go. The trailer full of lawn equipment was like the section of a rocket that's cast off after it's burned its fuel. Vital, but ultimately disposable. From there, Gicanto drove to the San Antonio airport, where he put the truck in long-term parking, which would help to throw off the pursuers. We took the shuttle to a rental car place where Gicanto selected a van, probably the last time he'd be able to use his credit card, and we were on our way. "Gicanto," I told him as we sped past on I-10, "I am incredibly grateful for you for doing this. But you're spending all of this money. Are you going to be okay?" "Well, we won't need money where we're going, right?" he said. "Just credits or whatever." "Gold-pressed latinum," Alice suggested. I ignored this, not wanting to cover the same old ground again. I'd made my position clear, and Gicanto still wanted to help me. I had to hope they were going to come out of this okay. Gicanto powered through the long drive, drinking cup after cup of coffee. We stopped only to eat for frequent coffee-induced bathroom breaks. Oh, and once to visit the gigantic sporting goods store to buy camping equipment whose only purpose was to provide a realistic cover story. I was sprawled out in the back, Alice next to Gicanto. Both of us slept a lot. When I wasn't sleeping, my feelings shifted from fear of getting caught to worrying about my mother to daring to hope I might actually be able to see Tamret again. Once Gicanto told us to wake up, he was grinning because the highway turned onto the main street that ran through downtown Roswell, New Mexico, where the street lights were shaped like flying saucers. We drove right past the UFO museum where Gicanto said he'd spent many hours doing research. This whole town thought of UFOs as something cute, a funny symbol to bring in the tourists. If they'd ever met one of the real monsters who flew around in flying saucers, they might have felt differently. After what seemed like an endless amount of driving, we pulled off the desolate Highway 93 onto the even more desolate and curiously named Mercury Highway. This was where things started to get a little unsettling. We passed signs letting us know we were getting close to military land. We were warned of missile testing and promised imminent arrest. Jacanto said that there was nothing to worry about as long as we did not cross into the actual base. We'd be left alone. We stopped at the campground called Hawkeye Hill. It was late afternoon by then and unbelievably hot. As we set up our tents, I downed a couple of bottles of water, which kept me alive but not particularly quenched. Within 5 minutes, I was sweaty and hot and miserable, and that was with my temperature-controlling high-tech suit under my clothes. For Jacanto and Alice, it must have been 100 times worse.
"This place is nothing but ridiculous,"
Jacanto said as we worked.
"Look how close we are to the base."
He gestured, and I saw a line of orange signs spaced maybe 50 yards apart, warning us we were about to cross into Area 51 and be arrested. They were less than 100 feet away from the campground, which was absolutely without amenities. The remnants of old cook fires were the only signs that human beings had ever been here before.
"Only the hardest of hardcore Area 51 freaks ever camp here," Jacanto said. "It's for the complete wackos, guys who have lost all touch with reality."
"How did you know about it then?" I asked. He grinned.
"Oh, I've camped here lots of times. I know the ropes."
In the distance, I could see Humvees crossing back and forth upon the featureless grounds of the base, the sun glinting off their side view mirrors, and they left trails of dust like comets. Once the tents were set up, we crawled into the largest one to escape the relentless desert sun. We drank from our canteens and ate sandwiches we bought at the last little town we've gone through. The bread was stale, and the cheese was hard, but I wasn't complaining. From that point on, it would be nothing but food bars.
"I need some sleep if I'm going to be of any use, but I'll wake up sometime after dark. Then we move."
"Do you think we'll actually be able to make it very far?"
Alice asked.
"No,"
Jacanto told her.
"The soldiers haven't taken their eyes off us since we stopped. They'll be watching us with night vision. I'd say we get maybe 10 feet down to the base before we're arrested."
Jacanto smiled at me.
"Then it's time for you to do your thing, or we all go to jail."
"Are we up for this, Smelly?" I asked.
"No,"
it said.
"I've let you bring us out into this desolate wilderness for the pleasure of taking in the scent of your perspiring companions. Of course I'm up for it."
Jacanto slept until about midnight, and we packed up our equipment, and we were on our way in less than half an hour. The temperature had dropped significantly, and it was now quite cold, though the suit kept me well insulated. It hardly mattered. We weren't going to be outside long. The point, Jacanto explained to us, was to convince the soldiers that we were wackos. We had to be believable wackos, which meant we needed to be carrying provisions and maps and other hiking equipment. We had to look like people who believed we could cross the outlying Nevada desert, slip into a military base, and reach buildings that were miles inside the perimeter.
"Once they stop us,"
Jacanto said,
"they'll ask us questions, so just focus on how angry you are that the government's not telling us what they know about aliens. Unless they decide we're actual terrorists, they'll eventually call the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department to come take us to jail. That shouldn't be a problem. Lincoln County's big, but the population is small, and it's the middle of the night. There aren't going to be too many officers on duty. It should be at least half an hour before anyone arrives, so we'll have plenty of time."
I started to take off my outer clothes, but I didn't get past the top button of my shirt before a disembodied arm appeared out of nowhere and slapped the back of my hand.
"Don't bother,"
Smelly said, as his floating arm illusion vanished.
"The suit works fine with your outer clothes on."
"Then why did you let me take them off when—"
"Because it was funny, okay? Don't you primitive oozeballs understand humor?"
I turned to the others. "Apparently I don't have to take off my outer clothes." Jacanto laughed.
"Man, your AI is funny."
We headed out into the night, and as predicted, we had not taken more than a few steps past one of the orange warning posts before we heard the rumbling of an engine, and headlights blinded us. I tried to blink light and sweat out of my eyes. I felt like I needed to see what was going on in order to not do something that would get us shot. But it was all just a blur. Soldiers were shouting at us, warning us to drop to our knees and put our hands behind our heads, or we'd be shot. I squeezed my eyes shut and did exactly what they said to do. There were 2 of them, pistols in hand, scowling at us as we kneeled in the blinding brightness of the headlights. The soldiers cuffed our hands behind our backs, and they patted us down looking for weapons. For the record, handcuffs hurt, even if they're not ridiculously tight. I can't endorse a life of crime. We were then placed into the back of the Humvee and driven a short distance through the desert to an isolated guard post, a small building with a few workstations and an interrogation room. One, I imagine, had been used to question many UFO enthusiasts over the years. On our way in, I glanced around, taking note of everything I saw. There were 2 other soldiers visible at the workstations, one filling out paperwork, one playing a game on his phone. We were going to have to deal with them if we planned to escape. Once we were in the bare room and sitting on metal chairs, another soldier came in and began to question us. He did his best to act like he took us seriously as a national security threat, but it was written all over his face. He thought Gicanto was just another nut, and an irresponsible nut at that, for taking 2 kids onto a secure military base. The soldier barked questions at us, like he didn't know how to ask anything without shouting. Why were we here? Who did we work for? What were our intentions?
"We have a right to know the truth,"
Gicanto shouted.
"You can't hide it from us any longer."
You can't keep your secrets forever.
Alice shouted, like she actually believed what she was saying.
Why can't you tell us the truth?
The UFO is part of our national heritage, I said, somewhat lamely, like the Liberty Bell. The soldier was a professional and didn't roll his eyes. After an hour of this, it was pretty clear he decided we were clueless idiots who put our freedom in jeopardy for no good reason. He left the room for about 15 minutes and then came back to tell us we were being handed over to the civilian authorities.
What's going to happen to us then?
Alice asked, sounding completely frightened. She was either really worried or a terrific actor.
Your friend is attempting to deceive the authority figures,
Smelly informed me, as if he'd guessed what was on my mind.
Its heart rate is steady, and it shows no sign of secreting its nasty perspiration. The unevolved being does not waver.
You're going to jail for sure, the soldier said to Gicanto. I don't know what's going to happen to these kids. That's for the county to figure out. Can you at least loosen my cuffs? I asked the soldier. They're really tight. I can't feel my hands. He looked at me, and I could see he was suspicious. This was the oldest trick in the book, to be sure. But on the other hand, I was a kid, and if word got out he'd been unnecessarily cruel to a minor, he knew it would be bad news for him. The soldier peered down to study me.
You're not gonna do anything stupid now, are you?
I shook my head and tried to look like I was holding back tears. The soldier leaned in with his keys, and as soon as he made contact, I grabbed his wrist and whispered, "Zap it!" too quietly for anyone but Smelly to hear. Instantly, 50,000 volts shot through my hand. The soldier convulsed, his eyes shot upward, and he fell to the floor. Sorry, I said to the soldier, who clearly couldn't hear me anymore.
Zap him? Smelly asked. That's the command you give? The suit is the most sophisticated piece of technology currently on this ridiculous planet. It does not zap.
Seemed to zap pretty well to me, I said. I willed the suit to give me superior strength and to shield my skin. I pulled my hands apart, breaking the cuffs, and they snapped like they were made of spaghetti.
The key's right there,
Gicanto said, gesturing towards the floor. I shrugged. I thought this would be cooler, I said. I took the key and unlocked Gicanto and Alice's cuffs, and then used it to rid myself of my own broken cuffs, which were dangling from my wrists like weird jewelry. You guys wait here, I told them. I wanted to act brave, but the truth was, I was really scared. Back when my friends and I had broken into the Fatic prison, things had happened too quickly for me to think much about what we were doing. Plus, there had been several of us. Steve and me son, who could handle most of the fighting, Charles and Diana, who could tackle the strategic issues, and Tamret, who could figure out a way about any mess. It hadn't been all my burden, and now it was. Alice was smart, and Gicanto was ex-military, but this was still my show. I was in charge. Gicanto and Alice were here to help me, but their freedom, and maybe now that we'd attacked a soldier, their lives were on the line. I couldn't mess this up. I turned to open the door. I stepped out, my hands behind me like they were still cuffed. The soldier playing the game on his phone looked up. Hey, the other guy said I could use the bathroom, I told him. The two soldiers looked at each other. The one doing the paperwork shrugged. The one with the phone gestured towards the closed door across the room. "Can you open it for me?" I asked. He sighed and got up. As he walked over, I realized I hadn't thought this ruse through too well, because if I really were handcuffed, this guy was also going to have to pull my pants down for me, and neither one of us was going to like that very much. In fact, as he put his hand on the doorknob, a look came across the soldier's face, like he suddenly understood what he was going to be asked to do. I decided not to let him worry. I put a hand on him and shot him full of electricity. The other soldier looked up at the crackling sound. The scent of something burning hovered in the air. I could see the alarm in his eyes, and he reached for his sidearm, but I was already there, leaping across the 20 feet, hands out. I crashed into him, zapping him. Yeah, that's right, zapping. And landed almost gracefully on my feet. I ran back into the interrogation room and opened the door. "We're good," I said. They began moving towards the door.
"There's no way to know how long before another soldier stopped by,"
Giacanto said.
"We've got to move."
I went outside alone to make sure no other soldiers were lurking. It was quiet. I grabbed a set of keys from a post near the door, and we went out back and got into the Humvee. It was time to find us a UFO.